welcome to the Wednesday edition of Katrina's Creations. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. For my yarn advent calendar this year, I got a yarn advent calendar and I also got a fiber advent calendar that I opened. I'm going to get ready to spin the fiber. However, I need or want to find out what my yardage is going to be. Now, this technique I'm going to show you, you can actually use anytime you want to kind of find out what your yardage, or at least a close guesstimate of what your yardage is going to be. So let's get started. The first couple things that I am going to need, I have this little scale. I will put a link. I couldn't find this exact one anymore because I've had this for quite a few years, but I will put a link down below. I think it was like, the one that is currently available, it's under $10. I think it was like $6 something. It's worth it. I've used this quite a bit, not just for measuring fiber, but sometimes if I want to find out when I finished a project and I have some yarn left over, it's kind of nice to get at least a loose guess of how many yards of. It's always good when I finish a project to find out exactly, well, not exactly, but close to how many yards I have left. So I'm going to take you through the process of finding out this formula, and I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see what I am going to do. All right, here is my scale. Now this scale, when you turn it on, you have a choice of what unit you want it to be. I'm going to use grams because I'm basing it out of 100 grams, which is what a full skein of yarn usually is. They come in 25, 50, or 100 grams. I'm going to base it on 100 grams just because it's a little easier to figure. So I'm going to turn it on, and it's already set to grams. You can see that little G is grams. It also will do ounces, and pounds, but of course we don't have a pound of yarn, so I'm doing grams. Okay, it has zeroed out. Now each of my little packets, here they are, if I just put on one, it doesn't even register. And some of these little packets of yarn are larger than others. Like this is a smaller packet, this is a very smaller packet, but this one's more stuffed. So I'm going to take 5 because I have a total of 35 of these little packets. So I'm just going to stack 5 of them together. Now you can see my scale says 0 right now. Now if I just put 1 in there, it really doesn't change. So I'm going to actually put 5 because you can see some of these, like this is a lot more than this is. So I just want to get an average. This is not overly scientific here, but if I pile everything on here, and it is showing it is 11 grams. I'm going to do it a second time just to make sure that I'm getting the same reading. And I am. It is saying 11 grams total, and that's for 5. So I have a total, I'm going to put this away now. And I brought my little whiteboard out. You didn't know you were getting a math lesson while we went for here. So I have 11 grams for 5 skeins. I have, or 5 little bundles. So I have a total of 35. So I'm going to multiply it times 7, which means I have a total of 77 grams of fiber. So now my decision is, I need to decide what weight of yarn I'm going to make when I spin it and whether I'm going to ply the yarn. So here's how we're going to do this. An average skein, like I said, is 100 grams. Now I did a little research and I found a vastly different yardage from one website to the next per yarn weight. So in other words, one website that I went on said that most worsted weight 100 gram skeins are 150 to 200 yards. However, when I went over to Knit Picks and I chose 3 different worsted weight yarns, they all were 200 yards each. So they were on the high end of what this other website said. The same website said fingering weight yarns were averaging between 350 and 450 yards. I again went over to Knit Picks, chose 3 random fingering weight 100 gram skeins, and they averaged 400. So that fell right in the middle of what the other website said. And then I looked at lace weight yarn, and this one was the one that was the most off. The website, and I'm not going to mention which one it was at this point, they said that most lace weight yarns that were 100 grams were 400 to 600 yards. That I really felt was off a lot, because it's like lace weight should be almost double what the fingering weight is, because it is twice as thin. So when you look at yarn weights, lace weight is your very finest weight yarn. That should have the highest yardage. If you double lace weight, you get fingering weight, which means your fingering weight should be half of the yardage of the lace weight. Worsted weight is 2 fingering yarns held together would equal the thickness, for the most part, of worsted. So your worsted weight should be half of what your fingering weight is. So this is what I came up with based on the averages of what I was finding. Worsted, on average, was 200 yards. Fingering, on average, was 400 yards. And lace consistently was coming up at 880. So you can see that this is half of this, and fingering is half of lace. So this is the yardage that I came up with. So if we divide 100 grams into this, for every 200, in a 200 yard skein, for every gram you were getting 2 yards. In fingering weight, you were getting 4 yards per gram, and in lace weight, you were getting 8.8 yards per gram. Now, I have 77, so if I make this worsted weight, so if I multiply my 70 grams per this number, which is per yards per gram, for the worsted weight, I am going to come out with roughly 154 yards. If I spin this at fingering weight at 4 yards per gram times the 77, I'm going to get approximately 308 yards. If I spin this at lace weight, I'm going to get roughly 622 and a little more than a half. This isn't exact, but it kind of gives you an estimate. Lace weight is very hard to spin because you have to spin it so thin it breaks very easily. You have to watch the tension real careful. I want more than 150 yards out of this because I don't know what I'm going to do with only 154 yards. So I am going to be spinning this at fingering weight. Now here's another thing to take into consideration. If you ply the yarn, because this is based on singles, if you ply this, which means you're going to take 2 strands and wrap them together like this for extra strength, then you have to have this yet again, which means you are getting only 70 some yards out of it for worsted weight. Fingering weight, you would just be a little over 150 yards. And down here you would be around 311. So, and that's if you had 2 ply. If you make 3 ply, then you've got to divide this by 3. So it's going to take you down to even less yardage. So I am going to be single plying this. I'm not going to ply it at all. In other words, it's just going to be single spun. So I can get the most out of this yarn so I can have enough yarn to do something with it. So how does this formula work for you? Okay, how can you apply it? Say you finish a project and it's worsted weight yarn and you have a ball of yarn left, but you don't know how much yardage it is because you've wound it in, you know, out of the hank and it's into the ball, or if it's just like a Lion brand yarn, it's already in a skein, but you don't have any way of knowing how much you have. That's when the handy scale comes in. Measure how many grams of that yarn are left. Then look at your yarn ball and see how many grams were in that skein. On average, it's probably 100. So say you measure it, I'll hold up my little trusty lesson board again. So say you measure your ball of yarn and you have 50 grams left of a 100-gram skein of yarn. And look at the yardage for that skein of yarn and say, based on a worsted weight, that it was 200 yards. If you have half of it left, you know you have roughly 100 yards left. To make it a little bit more difficult, let's say that you measure it and you have, say, 30 grams left of the skein of a 100-gram ball. You're going to know that you got 2 yards on average. If it's a 200 skein, if it's a 200-yard skein in 100 grams, you know that it's roughly 2 yards per gram. So you just multiply 2 times that 30 and you're going to know that you have roughly 60 yards left. So that's how this formula will help, because like I said, you have leftover yarn and you want to use it in a project for something else. It's always good to know an estimate, close estimate of what you've got left. You would do the same whether it's fingering, worsted, or whatever, just you're going to use the same formula. But at least it gives you a rough idea of what yardage you have left in your skein so that you can plan other projects and use it for that. So now I'm going to take you over. We're done with the math lesson now. So I'm going to take you over and I'm going to show you the yarn, how I have it organized as far as how I'm going to spin it all together. And then I'm going to put it into order. So here are all of the yarns, and what I did when I pulled them out, I had them in this tub here. When I pulled them out, I grouped them by colors. In other words, I put all the greens together that transitioned into the blue, and there is a fiber here that is kind of a transitional color that kind of goes from the green to the blue. And these are some lighter color greens, and I have a yellow in between because this one is a transitional color as well. So I have them by color, and then I organize them from lightest to darkest of that particular shade. So I have, these are the odd ones over here. They're kind of a rosy kind of color. So they're a little kind of an orangey rose color. So I have these here. These are all grays to black. This over here is a real, well, you can't see it. There's one right here. This one is a real light green, and then it transitions all the way through to the blue. And then this is also a transitional color with some greens that has pink. And the pink goes all the way up to a rosy color where it transitions to more of a purple color. These are some browns here, but they're more of an orangey brown, not quite as vibrant as these. And then the ones over here are definite browns. They go from a light to, this looks black, but it's actually a real dark brown. So I also have a permanent magic marker, because once I decide what order these are going in, and I'm kind of playing with it at that time, I will number all of these so that when I get ready to spin them, I can just pull them out and go by number and keep track of it easier. So I'm going to number these real quick and I'll show you the order I've got them in. So here is my final progression. Just going to run it through here. The only ones I'm not crazy about are these two right in here, but I just don't know where else they're going to work right. So we go over to 20, and then 21 picks up here and goes into the brown all the way to the black. So that is the final color choices. So I hope you have found this little tutorial thing, I don't know what you would call this, tutorial math lesson. See, I hope you found it helpful, and yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget, Saturday we have hit 4,700 subscribers. We will be doing a yarn giveaway, so make sure you tune in on Saturday so you don't miss out, because it's something special this time for the yarn. So I will see you again on Saturday. Thanks for watching. Bye, everybody.